Blessed day, my people, and welcome back to the Daily Scoop, where we break down the biggest conversation happening in Jamaican entertainment and beyond. Today, we have plenty to discuss. We are talking about Future Fambo and Beanie Man, questions surrounding Future Fambo absence from Summer Sizzle, Massacre, Skillibeng, and Intence, plus the growing cause for a fresh lyrical clash in dancehall. We are also get into some very strong comments from Mr. Vegas about Vybz Cartel and the influence Cartel has had on modern dancehall. So there is all happening. Let's get straight into it. People, let's begin with Future Fambo. Future Fambo recently appeared in an interview with Winfred Williams on stage, and naturally some of the questions were about his absence from the Beanie Man Summer Sizzle event. No, this is interesting because Future Fambo suggests that there had actually been discussions about him appearing on the show. According to him, there was a conversation involving people from his team and individual connected to the event. He indicated that there were discussions surrounding payments and performance arrangements, but somewhere along the way things apparently fell apart. And this is where the story gets interesting because according to Fambo, he was under the impression that Beanie Man wanted him on the show, but eventually that appearance never happened. Now, whether this was simple a business disagreement, a communication problem, or something deeper, we don't know everything that happened behind the scene, and that is important because when artists speak publicly about situations like these, we are often hearing one side of a much bigger story. Fambo also acknowledged that he has had some harsh things to say about Beanie Man over the years, and that's another angle people should not ignore. If you have publicly criticized somebody repeatedly, then eventually working together can become complicated. Business is business, but personal history can still affect business relationships. So the big question becomes, was Fambo really supposed to be on Summer Sizzle? And if so, what caused the arrangement to collapse? That is something the people involved would have to clarify. Another part of the interview that stood out was Fambo speaking about his journey and success. The discussion was not simple about dancehall anymore. It moved into spirituality, faith, money, and maintaining perspective while becoming successful. Fambo spoke about the importance of waiting on God and not allowing financial success to become the only measurement of achievement. That is something worth highlighting because the entertainment business can easily make people believe that everything comes down to money, streams, booking, cars, and popularity. But artists also have to think about their personal lives and what they want their legacy to represent. Future Fambo comments suggested that he sees his career through that wider lens, and regardless of whatever disagreement may exist in dancehall, that's an interesting part of his story. Now let's shift gear and big up the king of dancehall, Beanie Man, who celebrate another birthday. Beanie Man has been part of the Jamaican popular culture for decades, from his early days as a young performer to becoming one of the most recognizable names in dancehall internationally. His contribution is undeniable. Whether somebody call him the king of dancehall, one of the king, or simple one of the genre greatest entertainers, the catalog speak for itself. So from the Daily Scoop, happy birthday to Beanie Man. And yes, the man himself was joking around about his birthday and encouraging other people celebrating during August to enjoy their special month as well. But naturally, Jamaican social media could not resist the age debate. People immediately started asking, how old is Beanie Man? Well, regardless of the number, one thing remained clear. Beanie Man has been around long enough to see multiple generations of dancehall artists come and go, and is still is still a part of the conversation. That is longevity. Now, people, let's get into one of the biggest dancehall conversation right now. Skillibeng and Intence. There are people who believe this could be the fresh clash that dancehall needs. Think about it. We have spent plenty of time talking about the possibility of Massacre versus Alkaline. We have heard discussion involving Massacre and Skillibeng. We have heard people talking about different combination, but Skillibeng and Intense, that's a different type of matchup. Both artists have their own sound, both have their own fan base, both have strong personalities, and lyrically there could be a lot of room for creativity. The important thing, however, is that if artists ever decide to clash, it should remain about the music. That is where dancehall clashes have historically been the strongest. You don't need real life violence, you don't need threats, you don't need anything outside of music. Give the people lyrics, creativity, rhythm, punchlines, and performances. That's what a clash is supposed to be. So if Skillibeng and Intense ever decide to really go at each other musically, the question is, who would actually have the advantage? Skillibeng has international experience and a distinctive sound. Intence has his own lyrical approach and a fan base that would definitely show up. It could be interesting, but right now we are talking about personalities, possibilities, not confirming that an official clash is happening. Another discussion happening is whether Massacre need a major lyrical moment right now. Massacre has just released his project Forever Rain, and naturally attention has shifted toward the album performance and his position in dancehall. But some fans believe that an artist at his level also needs a major competitive moment. That is when names like Alkaline continue to enter the conversation. For years, fans have discussed the possibility of a serious lyrical confrontation involving Massacre and Alkaline. And there is a major question. Would either artist actually benefit from going there right now? That's something only they can answer. Artists don't necessarily need a clash to prove themselves. Sometimes the best response is simply putting out great music and continuing to build your career. And Massacre is already operating on an international level. So maybe the better question is not whether he needs a war. Maybe the question is whether dancehall itself needs a fresh competitive rivalry. Now, let's talk about something that generated serious discussion. Mr. Vegas recently spoke about Vybz Cartel and the influence Cartel has had on dancehall, and Vegas' position was very clear. He believed Cartel deserves substantial musical credit, not simply because Cartel has loyal fans, not simply because Cartel has famous songs, but because according to Vegas, Cartel changed elements of the sound itself. That is a much bigger argument. And whether you're a Gaza supporter, a Vendetta supporter, a Jenna supporter, or simple somebody who listens to dancehall without taking sides, it is difficult to have a serious conversation about modern dancehall without mentioning Vybz Cartel. That's just the reality of the genre history. Cartel influenced the way artists approach melodies, he influenced lyrical pattern, he influenced production, he influenced presentation, and perhaps most importantly, he showed a generation of young artists that dancehall could be presented in different ways. This is where Mr. Vegas' argument becomes interesting. Vegas essentially raised the idea that perhaps what we are hearing today deserves to be recognized as something influenced heavily by a Cartel musical approach. Now, whether you agree that should technically be called a new genre in another debate, but the influence is worth discussing. Think about the number of young artists who came after Cartel. Many of them were influenced by his approach in one way or another. Some followed the formula, some deliberately went against it, some built their own identities by differentiating themselves from him, but either way, Cartel became part of the reference point. That's what happens when an artist becomes influential. People don't even have to mention your name for your influence to be visible. And that is why the Cartel conversation continues. There is another important point here. Sometimes an artist becomes so influential that other artists can build careers by either embracing that influence or rejecting it. That's something we have seen throughout music history, and Jamaican dancehall is no different. Some artists have openly embraced cartel, others have positioned themselves against him, but either way, he is still part of the conversation. That is why some people argue that Vybz Kartel remain one of the central figures in understanding where contemporary dancehall is today. Again, that does not mean every current artist is copying him. Absolutely not. Artists such as Masika, Skillibeng, Intence, Alkaline, and many others have their own identities. But influence and imitation are not necessarily the same thing. You can influence somebody without that person becoming a copy of you. That is an important distinction. Now, let's talk about Alkaline. One of the arguments being made is that Alkaline successfully developed a strategy where he did not need to constantly call Vybz Kartel name in order to build his own identity. Instead, he created the Vendetta identity and allowed the music to carry the conversation. That's part of what made his rise so interesting. He became successful while maintaining a certain level of separation from the traditional dancehall formula. And that's a lesson that younger artists can learn from. You don't necessarily need to attach yourself to the biggest name in the genre. Sometimes you have to create your own lane, build your own audience, develop your own sound, and let people debate your position. That's how careers become sustainable. Now we are back to Intence, because the recent tension involving Intence as people asking whether he should continue down the road he is on. And here is where I think artists need to be careful. If you're going to compete lyrically, compete lyrically. If you're going to make a song, make the song. But don't allow entertainment competition to become something dangerous in real life. Dancehall has always been competitive, but the greatest clashes were memorable because of the music. So if Intense want to answer Skillibeng, let him answer through music. If Skillibeng want to respond, let him respond through music. That is the type of competition fans can enjoy. So, people, we covered plenty today. Future Farmer has spoken about his experience surrounding Beanie Man summer season, and questions remain about exactly what happened behind the scene. We celebrated Beanie Man and his remarkable longevity in Jamaican music. We discussed the possibility of a fresh lyrical competition involving Skillibeng and Intense. We look at the continuing conversation around Massacre and Alkaline. We examine Mr. Vega's argument that Vybz Kartel deserves significant recognition for his contribution to modern dancehall. And that is where we are going to leave it today. But I want to hear from you. Who do you think would win a lyrical clash between Skillibeng and Intense? And do you agree with Mr. Vegas about the influence of Vybz Kartel? Let me know in the comment section. Until next time, bless up, stay safe, and keep your eyes on the Daily Scoop.